And we are recording, and now we're going to invite everybody in.
It's a little bit of feedback, not sure where that's coming from.
All right, so people are streaming in. We have 7 attendees so far. It'll take people a few minutes. And we got 13. To 21. Still coming in. Welcome everybody. We'll start in just a minute here. Just want to give everybody an opportunity to arrive.
Don, I think I'll get started and as people arrive.
Sounds good.
So greetings, everyone. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on what the climate movement is missing with Anne Hancock, Executive Director of the Center for Climate Protection. And my name is Caroline Staton, co-director here with Don Hall at Transition US, and I'll be your host. Before we get started, though, I wanted to make a few quick announcements. First of all, this webinar is sponsored by Transition US, National Hub, excuse me, of the International Transition Towns Movement, which is in over 50 countries around the world. And in each of those places, there are communities that are actively building resilience from the bottom up in thousands of communities all over the world. You can learn more about us and find a transition initiative near you, or perhaps you're interested in starting one in your location. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can support our programs like this one, and you can find more information on our website at transitionus.org. I wanted to tell you a few other announcements before we get started in events. So we have a 6-session effective collaboration online training, and Don Hall will be the trainer for that. And Don, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, the Effective Collaboration Online Training course officially starts on April 9th, but it's really getting started now. Those who've already signed up are already on our course platform introducing ourselves, and the first recorded lecture will be available on Wednesday of next week. And this is a 6-session course in everything you need to build group capacity and navigate the inevitable ups and downs of group life. We go through the stages of group development: forming, storming, norming, performing, giving key tools, resources, perspectives, methodologies to help you work better together in collaborative groups. And we've done this several times already. The feedback has been tremendous. I believe it's probably the most comprehensive course on the subject, and a skill that we can always get better at. And really the how well we work together in our groups determines how well we're able to do our work out in the world. So if anybody's interested, there's still time to register at transitionus.org.
Thank you, Don, and I encourage people to participate. It's a really great course. So I wanted to also explain a little bit about the format. This is the Zoom webinar platform, as you know, because you're here. And we'll run for about 40 to 45 minutes. We'll begin with a presentation by a presenter and followed by Q&A. And this webinar will be recorded and shared on the Transition US YouTube channel within the next few days, so you can find it there as well. We're currently streaming it via Facebook Live right now. And to preserve sound quality, everyone except our presenter is currently muted, but you can submit questions at any time. There's a Q&A button on most screens. You'll find that on the bottom. If you move your cursor down, you'll see the Q&A button. You can push that, type it into the chat. And I see somebody is mentioning that it is a bit echoey and difficult to understand. So, Don, I'm not sure if you know anything about how to remedy that, but perhaps we can, or else we'll roll with what we have. So thank you for pointing that out. So I wanted to get to our presentation now. I'm going to give a few introductory remarks to Anne and then pass it over to her. So I've known Anne for quite some time. We've worked together in the past. And through all of these years, Anne has tirelessly worked for the betterment of the planet. Since 2001, she's been executive director of the Center for Climate Protection and has worked steadily on ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, raise awareness about climate change, and promote cleaner energy use. She has over 25 years of experience in community leadership, education, fundraising, sustainability, planning, and is a force to be reckoned with. And I'm so grateful you're joining us today. You've inspired me, you've inspired school-age teens, government officials, business leaders to make more environmental choices. And I'm so looking forward to you helping us understand what the climate movement is missing and what strategies will optimize and focus our resources to produce speed and scale solutions, those solutions that produce massive greenhouse gas emissions reductions, and just what the climate movement is missing. So looking forward to hearing from you, Anne, getting some of your good ideas and motivating all of us. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful to be invited to do this. I've never done a webinar on this topic, never, been the lead presenter, so we'll see how it goes. So I think we're going to start by finding out who is on this webinar, right? We have some questions for you. I can't hear you.
John, do you have the polling questions? There they go. There they are. So the first question is, you should see this on your screen. So, and if by chance you don't, if it didn't pop up, you can type something in the chat. But if you answer the polling question on your screen, just click on what is your answer. Question 1, are you part of the climate movement? So yes or no are the options. And just go ahead and click on those. And once you've done that, there's a second question. if you answered yes, that you are part of the climate movement, the second question is, for how long? The options are less than a year. Next is about 1 to 5 years. Next is 6 to 10 years. Last is more than 10 years. So please also answer that again on your screen. And the third is, do you consider yourself a climate leader? Yes or no? And Dawn, I think you're going to be the one reading the answers.
There's another question.
There is another question. Thank you, Anne. Do you consider yourself a climate funder? Yes or no? And Dawn, you'll be getting the answers to that, so you'll let us know.
Well, yeah, 32 people out of 44 on the call have voted so far. If anybody is yet to vote, just have a few more moments and I will end the poll and it will display on the screen so everybody will be able to see it. All right. So I'm going to close the poll now. Thank you for your responses, and you should be able to see the results on your screen right now.
Fantastic.
So just, yeah, any comments on that, Anne?
Just, I am once again very grateful to be in the company of so many people who are part of the climate movement and climate leaders. Look at that, 71% say, yes, I am a climate leader. Fantastic. So shall I go ahead now?
Yes, please.
My screen isn't advancing. Why not? Oh,
You might have to click on your presentation again.
Oh, okay. There we go. Thank you, Don. Alrighty, so let's just remind ourselves of our situation. We are in a climate emergency. That climate is an existential threat, and it's a threat multiplier, meaning that it makes things like food systems, security, much, much, much more aggravated. And it is the issue that if we don't deal with it, basically the game is off. So we have to deal with this issue as a priority. We can't adapt our way out of the crisis. It's going to accelerate sea level rise, all the things that we know about. So we can't adapt our way out of the crisis. There's still time, and it's imperative to fix this situation we're in that we reduce greenhouse gas emissions at speed and scale. And now, even though we aren't hearing each other, we can have a collective cry. Oh. So, speed and scale solutions. Here's 2 examples of what does deliver. And by speed and scale, I mean big and fast. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions big and fast. 2 examples that worked. Here in California, look at that red line there about California's greenhouse gas emissions. They have gone down, even though our population has gone up, even though our economic activity has gone up. Now, it hasn't gone down nearly fast enough, but still, given what all is going on in the nation and the world, it's remarkable. Another example is called Community Choice Energy. It's a local program that serves electricity to businesses and residents. And this photo here is from May 2014 in Sonoma County, when we were able, after 9 years of pushing, to get our local Community Choice Energy program serving customers. We chose to push this and invest a lot of political capital because it is the most powerful thing, at least in California, that a local community can do to lower its greenhouse gas emissions, and it has enormous side benefits like saving money, being an innovation platform, helping energy democracy. So it really is a very, very powerful solution that can be implemented at the local government. I'm going to show you how it's spread across California. But first, here is a chart that represents what's been happening with Sonoma County's greenhouse gas emissions. And the color to focus on is yellow here. That's our electricity sector. And you can see that when Sonoma Clean Power went live, it started dramatically reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in the electricity sector. So much so that our emissions in Sonoma County were lower in 2016 overall than they were in 1990, despite an increase in population and an increase in economic activity. Once again, this is not sufficient, but it's still trending us in the right way. Here's what's happened with community choice energy across California. The green on the right-hand side, on the right-hand map, are those communities now in California that have operational community choice entities. And by operational, I mean that they are serving business and residential customers. And the other colors are the various stages leading up to serving customers. So there are now 19 operational community choice entities serving over 8 million Californians, and we anticipate that by 2020, half of Californians will be served by community choice energy. So here is the J-curve of the population being served. You can see that this is a positive disruptive force in our electricity sector. Here are the cumulative and annual greenhouse gas emissions avoided because of community choice. Here are the dollars saved by community choice energy customers per year. So if you want to learn more about this solution, you can check out our website. This is one of our programs, cleanpowerexchange.org. So let's go to our main topic here, which is how do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions at speed and scale? Why would we do this? Because we have a vision of a positive future for ourselves, our children, and all life. I think that we can all hold hands and agree that this is what we want to see happen and what we're working towards. So in order to achieve that vision, we know that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions big and fast at speed and scale. So to do that, we know that to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at speed and scale, we need to massively, rapidly change behavior. So here we are with our givens. So how do we make that happen? That is the question that I personally have been involved in for a long, long time. And judging by the polling results, a lot of you have been involved in. What is that thing that we need to do? So this is why I'm calling this what's missing in the climate movement, because we don't have a roadmap for reducing greenhouse gas emissions at speed and scale on a global level. We don't have it. We here in the Center for Climate Protection have been looking for who has outlined that roadmap. Now we're well aware of Drawdown, we're well aware of Mark Jacobson's work, and for example, the California Air Resources Board has put out their set of solutions. And yet, even though there's some brilliant work that's been done and brilliant activism that's being done, where is that roadmap that can show us how we can align and be powerful enough to produce the results we need to fulfill our vision? So we want this roadmap to be as vetted and evidence-based as possible. So here's a little cartoon that if you want to make fun of the climate movement, then this classic does that. I want to also say that in the research that we've done about where is that roadmap, we have looked at the 4 common strategies in the climate movement, which are education, individual action, research and development and innovation, and policy change. We've looked at these and said, all right, what of these are going to deliver those rapid, massive changes in human behavior? Speed and scale are our watchwords here. So here's a little fill in the blanks for the roadmap. But first, and I'm going to come back to this, but first let's talk about the caveats. So first of all, change is nonlinear, and here we've got this linear progression for our roadmap, but yet we know that change is nonlinear. Change looks more like this, especially in a complex social system that involves the natural world as well. And this is probably just 1/100th of what a systems dynamic model would look like that, that would represent the real version of this. So we know that, you know, we're just doing a sketch of what we're really talking about. And the second is that all models are wrong, some are useful. So if we're sketching out this roadmap, we know that it's incomplete for one thing, and it may be inaccurate, that we will discover its inaccuracies as we go along. I like to use the analogy of a blueprint for constructing a home. If any of you, like me, have done some building construction, then you know that the blueprints are bound to need to be changed as you go along. But you still have to have a blueprint in order to get started. So here is an exercise, and if we were all in the same room together, I would say, all right, let's take 15, 20 minutes at least to get started on what you think is that roadmap for what's needed to produce a positive future for ourselves, our children, and all life, to deliver those massive, rapid behavior changes that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. This roadmap is also called a theory of change. A theory of change is how you think change happens. And I will assert that everybody I've come in contact has a theory of change about this. Whether they thought about it, whether they've made it articulated it, or not. And what's very interesting is to tease that out of ourselves and find out, how do we think this is going to happen? What are we doing that we think is going to produce these results? So I hope that you're thinking about this right now, and maybe some of you already have a theory of change. So let me find my notes here. Oh, and in fact, Caroline and I have been talking about this for years, and she compiled 12 pages of notes that she gathered up here and there about different parts of the climate movement and what people and groups assert are their roadmaps for how to produce this positive future. So here is our theory of change. We think that we need, and the evidence shows this, that if you want to produce massive, rapid behavior change, price signals are the most powerful, universal, immediate way to do that. But how do we change the price signals? And let me pause there before we go on. Solar, what's happened in the solar world with the descending prices for solar installations, and now it's in many places in accelerating was so cheaper than fossil fuel electricity generation. So how did that happen? Those who have analyzed what caused solar prices to go down, it started with policy. So policies unleash market forces that change price signals, making climate-friendly choices like going solar easier for everyone. So how do we get those policies? Policymakers enact those desired climate policies. So how do we make that happen? We have to identify and advocate for policy solutions, and we have to identify and elect policymakers who advocate and vote for the policy solutions we need. If we go back to the two examples I gave of speed and scale solutions, the first one being the state of California, that was policy that produced those reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in California. And that was policy decisions made by local elected leaders that said, yes, we're going to establish community choice energy agencies. Those produced the speed and scale solutions. But how does that happen? That happens, and we can do it at speed and scale, if we build an exponentially growing body of focused advocates who exert political power. How does that happen? Well, we are here. We need those climate leaders, like the 71% of you, in partnership with climate funders to create the pathway to align and mobilize activists and build the alignment and alliances with others in the movement to produce this roadmap to deliver the speed and scale solutions. Before going on, I want to acknowledge my two colleagues. On the left is Buddy, and on the right is Jock. And with them, we have been doing the research, we have been compiling the evidence, writing, and doing the thinking behind this theory of change. And it is definitely my joy to work with Buddy and Jock. I want to recommend this book. Don't even think about it, Why Our Brains Are Wired to Ignore Climate Change. We're going to ask in a moment how many of you have read this book. Why I like it and why I consider it to be one of the most important books in the climate field is because it talks about the things that don't work. In fact, 90% of the book dispels myths and demolishes notions we have about what should work to convince people to be part of the climate movement. And it's I just loaned it to a friend of mine and he said it's so depressing. But at the end is what, for me, sparked really an understanding of what we need to do, and it is part of our theory of change. So here's our polling question. I hope you're ready, Dawn. How many of you have read this book?
While people are answering, Anne, you can mention anything else about it if you'd like.
Well, I think I kind of summarized it, but I urge people to read to the end so that you can have the kind of what the author, George Marshall, says he feels is needed. So it's his idea of what's missing in the climate movement, although he doesn't lay out the whole roadmap for us.
And we have a question from someone wondering about if people have read part of it. I would encourage you to click yes if you've read part of it and not all of it.
So we've had 38 of 47 people respond so far. Maybe just take another minute. If anybody else wants to answer, and then we'll close the poll. Okay, well, looks like it's holding steady at 38. And I'll show the results here.
Oh my goodness. Okay, 18% have read it. Bravo. Thank you for taking the poll. Okay, I think we're ready to go on. So I want to share with you a term that Marshall describes, but I don't think he uses this term exactly. He calls it collective effervescence, kind of a lofty term, but it really is something that he talks about at the end of the book. And it is a shared experience that produces a joyful intoxication, an exciting, unified feeling during which people are transported outside of themselves. And I actually think that transition produces this, that people that I've encountered, of course, Caroline, has that feeling of joy and excitement and kind of, you know, a collective sense. And this is shared experiences can be in concerts, religion, protest movements, disasters, and hopefully participating in the climate movement. And this is where we go back to George Marshall's book. He contrasts how you feel when you have this collective effervescence, usually at some of these places, at concerts and, you know, at even a child's birthday party. And certainly with religious experiences when they're shared. He says, contrast that with most climate lectures that you go to. You come away feeling depressed and resigned and like, you know, just in despair or fear. And George Marshall says this is the opposite of what we need to be doing in order to build the climate movement and attract people to help us. And I think this is so accurate. And that's why I so admire what the transition movement is doing, is building that sense of hope and collective excitement and work together. This term, collective effervescence, which I probably wouldn't use outside of, you know, a little bit of an academic presentation, was coined by the French sociologist. So we're now ready for comments and questions. And I'm going to leave this, this image up on the screen.
Just wanted to alert people, there's a Q&A button. Again, most times it will show up on your Zoom menu bar on the bottom. If you hover around on that screen, you should see it, and you can type in your questions there. And then I also wanted to remind us that we had received several questions by email that I forwarded on to you. So we could do...
Actually, Caroline, yes. I realized that I forgot to cover a little bit more on this graph here. So while we're collecting questions, maybe I could do that. Is that all right?
That is absolutely fine. And again, okay, if you did want to address any of those other questions that came in too.
You know what? I didn't retain them. So if you want to shoot them to me verbally again, that would be great after I finish this up. So let's look at this second shape to the left. Build an exponentially growing body of focused advocates who exert political power. According to the evidence that we found from a researcher called Erica Chenoweth, who studied revolutions, and nonviolent and otherwise, throughout the world and throughout history, she said that to be effective, only a very small percentage of people need to be engaged, and her figure was 3.5%. This, to me, is very reassuring, actually, because it means that we can focus on recruiting the 3.5% of people who are concerned about the climate and who are willing to commit to doing something about it together in a focused way. And those people who will never agree with us or will never be pay attention to it. As George Marshall says, that's most people. We don't need to worry about that as long as we recruit the people and work together with that 3.5%. And this is, in order to have that body of people, we need to have that sense of, here's the term again, collective effervescence, that we are working together and we have joy and commitment together in doing that. And also this is where collaboration comes in, that there's no one organization that's going to be able to implement this whole roadmap with power and enough to change, make all the changes that we've shown in the roadmap. So collaboration is exceedingly important here. The next two shapes from the left, identify and advocate for policy solutions, and identify and elect policy, well, first the solutions. Not all solutions are created equal, as we know, and so in the paper that we're writing, we have outlined some criteria for what a good policy solution is that we want to advocate for. And some of those criteria are, of course, significant greenhouse gas emission reductions, cost-effective, also politically feasible, that there is a way to assess political feasibility as part of choosing those policy solutions for which to advocate. And we want to also apply best practices. How do we push policy solutions? Is it through protests? Is it through lobbyists? Is it through letter writing? Is it some combination of all of those? So that is all part of, that's packed into this overall strategy or roadmap or theory of change. And then on the price signals, that shape that has price signals in it, this is where we impact the other 96.5% of people. So it's not like we're ignoring and saying, you know, only certain people are involved. It's just recognizing what do we need to do in order to involve everybody in the solutions that we want to make happen. All right, that is the additions that I wanted to make.
Thank you. I wanted to let people know too, if you'd like to, and I'm sorry I didn't, if you'd like to ask your question live, you can raise your hand. If you go to the participant window, again, it's a tab usually on the bottom. If you click that, you can raise your hand and Don will call on you. So let me read some things that are in the chat and then I'll go to the Q&A. So one of the comments is from Vicki Robin. Hi, Vicki. Her friend Rick and Gracie says, if you want to change the world, you throw a better party. And we're developing many ways to have arts-based, open space, and super fun gatherings to learn together. So that's an offering there. Hopefully people will replicate that.
I love throw a better party. I mean, people who know me know I love to throw parties.
Here's a question from Robert Graff. How does collective effervescence reduce greenhouse gas emissions?
Great question. So if we have a repulsive movement, we're not going to be able to do this. We're not going to be able to grow an exponentially growing body of activists. We will never have the political force that we need to. And also, climate can't, you know, it can be depressing and it can be discouraging and there will be losses and defeats along the way. How do we stick together through those defeats and losses and through the sadness that we will experience? It's through the collective, It's through the collective that we do that. And actually there's, this doesn't directly relate to this, but it's something I learned, Caroline's heard me say this, that I learned from one of our board members, a psychotherapist and a spiritual, fantastic leader here and a poet. He said, hope and resolve are not feelings, they are choices that we make. And those choices of hope and resolve are held in place when we're working together in a convivial group.
And we have a lot of different questions. If you want to look yourself at the Q&A, you might be able to lump some things together, and if not, that's fine. But there's, again, an option to open that on the bottom of your screen.
I don't. Okay. I'm going to rely on you, Caroline, if you don't mind.
That's fine. So we have a lot of questions. Someone is asking about price signals and climate choices. And if that's easier, if it would be a global, if some of those price signals would be global.
Oh my gosh, of course. That would be fantastic. I mean, ultimately, that's where the biggest leverage is if we can all worldwide work in concert. The question is, how do we build up the political strength to make that happen? And so that's why this roadmap and why the design of an exponentially growing group, we just don't have the political force right now to do it worldwide, but oh yes, I mean, that's the ultimate goal.
Right. The model reminds Ellen of Citizens Climate Lobby. Do you see relationships there?
Absolutely, and those parallels, I mean, there's lots of groups and organizations doing terrific work, and actually one of my aspirations is to show along the way here some examples of organizations that are exemplify, groups that are doing the work that's outlined in this roadmap, so then we can hold hands better and become stronger together. So yes, Citizens Climate Lobby is advocating for fee and dividend, and that's a solution that if I had a magic wand, I would implement, because I think it would deal with the greenhouse gas emission problem, and it would deal with our equity problem. It would build political will. There's so many reasons to love the solution that Citizens Climate Lobby is pushing.
There's a question about Extinction Rebellion. Do you think that's the wrong way to go or the right way to go?
No, I think that it is a really good way to go. The thing, let me go back to what I hinted at in one of the slides, which talked about the 4 common strategies within the climate movement: education, individual action, research and development, and policy change. All of those things, if they're done in conjunction with policy change, can synergize. So Extinction Rebellion is fantastic for raising awareness and getting people on the streets, but if it isn't coupled with a specific focus, like, all right, here's what we're pushing towards, it can evaporate and the momentum can be lost, which can be discouraging for the participants as well. And in our paper, we contrast in the United States the Tea Party movement with the Occupy movement. And both movements arose around the same time. People took to the street en masse, got a lot of media attention, and the Occupy movement largely evaporated. Whereas the Tea Party movement, they strategized and they said, we're going to elect people, we're going to pass policies, and they have been a mighty force. So we want to be a mighty force. That means that we have to marry all this activity that we're seeing through Extinction Rebellion with a focus that wants to actually produce the changes that we need to have happen.
Great, thank you. And Janice Lynn is asking, I get the role of policy change to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now I want to know what is the role of adaptation to act along with mitigation?
Very good question. So there's many of the solutions for adaptation that overlap with mitigation. And just to clarify terms, adaptation means dealing with the impacts of climate change, and mitigation means avoiding them. An analogy in public health is preventing heart attacks, and then the adaptation is dealing with the heart attacks after you have them. So we want to, as said in an earlier slide, we can never adapt our way out of this crisis. So regardless of what you think or what's immediately in front of us, we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at speed and scale if we're going to fix this problem. So let's look for those solutions that do both.
Well, David is suggesting that a missing piece might be how we join separate initiatives into a unified movement, which allows us to stop competing for the limited resources, such as funding.
I love that. I love that. I agree. And I also want to say that I love also here's a missing piece of the, this roadmap, which is at the end, I'm going to ask for your feedback and your comments, and because this is evolving. This is something that we hatched in our organization, and we need people's brains on this, and so help us evolve this model so it's really makes sense to the biggest number of people possible, and that we can build that alignment to become powerful together. So thank you for saying, here's another missing piece.
Right. Shakhtari is saying that for decades he's been encouraging people to utilize design methodologies for all their events and projects that make the behavior we wish to promote more fun than behaviors we don't want to encourage.
Yep.
Anything else to say about that, Anne?
Just I agree. You're right. And fun. Let's have some.
Gisela is asking, what is the source of the 3.5% quote? The name of the researcher. And Vicki earlier in a chat said that she wasn't sure that that was a slam dunk, the 3.5%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, the woman's name is Erica Chenoweth, and she has a book out, and it's not a slam dunk. Actually, the biggest criticism I hear about the 3.5% is we don't need that much. So it could very well be, and some of the people who have worked in the halls of Sacramento here to lobby for policy, it's kind of like you don't need that many people at all. You just need some really effective, a handful of really effective people, and you can make big change happen.
Great. Wolfgang Schneider is saying, your 5 steps don't seem to lead toward rapid change if history is any indication. To me, it seems that only a rapid decrease in population will get us where we need to be. If we don't do it voluntarily, nature will do it for us. What comes to mind is voluntary death of older people for their grandchildren's sake, or global pestilence, an involuntary approach.
Whoa. Okay. Well, I don't know, short of and believe me, I'm laughing, but those are some of the eventualities that some writers and scientists are forecasting for us, that there is a lot of apocalypse in our future about famine and pestilence and so on and so forth. So it could very well be that happens. If we want to do that voluntarily, having seniors say, okay, I'm out of here, or having dramatic rapid reductions in population. I actually, that was kind of my first foray into activism, was looking at the population issues. So I agree that that we do need to rapidly reduce our populations. The thing is, scientists are giving us about 10 to 12 years to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, and we cannot voluntarily get people to reduce their reproduction in that short period of time. So I think that there are things that we can do, even given the size of our population, to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And if any of you have ever taken your own ecological footprint, it shows just how many planets each person would need to, yeah, if everybody had our consumption level, and it contrasts the consumption level of people in the United States with people in Europe, with people in China, and so on and so forth. And we can see by just those simple measures of our footprint how much variation there is in the impact that we each have. And there's a lot that we can do to lower the overall footprint. And what we argue with this roadmap, this theory of change, is that if we do that collectively through policy, we can go much farther faster. And the results in California and with community choice energy show that to be true.
Great. I'm going to take a few more of the typed in chats. Then, Don, I'll turn it over to you for the Facebook Live question. And we have a couple of hands up. So Joel is saying that there's one thing he's noticed that's missing. And Joel, I'm wondering if you want to, this is quite a lengthy question. Might you be one of the people that could bring it up live? So I'll wait and we'll hear from you about that, Joel, if you can do that. Let's see.
Caroline, where are you? It's hailing.
I know.
Welcome to sunny California.
Yep, it changes by the minute. Do you support the Innovative Energy and Carbon Dividend Act as supported by the Citizens Climate Lobby?
Yes.
Anything else you want to say about that?
Well, we kind of covered that a few minutes ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. So Lynn would like to, she's saying that the boxes are a little too small to read, but Anne, you'll be able to send us the slide deck, is that right? Another person wants that. So we'll make sure that participants get that and you can zoom in on things. And now I'm going to turn it over to you, Don, for the Facebook Live and the attendees that have their hand up, and we'll get back to the typed questions soon.
Okay, well, a question from our Facebook Live feed. We have Barbara Trag-Pollock asking, how do we broaden our support among hikers, birders, people who oftentimes don't want to think about climate change?
Among who? Heinekers?
Hikers.
Hikers.
Birders. And other people.
Birders. Oh. Well, if you subscribe to the we don't need everybody, then you may not need to expand to the hikers and birders who don't want to think about it. I mean, most of us don't want to think about it all the time. I don't. So what we have to do is recruit those people who are already passionate, who already want to work on this, and help focus them on the things that make a difference. And, you know, people are going to drop in and out of being part of working on this. That's okay. Hopefully, you know, once they come in and we have such a great party and they can see how effective it is, then they'll want to bring their friends and they'll want to stay involved and so on and so forth. But I think that if we focus on trying to persuade people instead of just enlist the ones who are already interested, I think it's harder. The polling in the United States shows that there is a huge body of people who are very, very, very concerned about this. And those are the ones that we want to recruit to be part of working together to make a difference.
Great. Well, we have two people who raised their hands to ask their question live on the air. First, I'll go to Dodie Anderson, and up next is Rebecca Blanco. So let's see if I can unmute Dodie. Okay, Dodie.
Yes, I'm in Montana, Missoula, Montana, and our policy advocates in the state legislature, the vast majority are, you know, in line with the monopoly utility, which is trying to save coal and oil. And so there is a group of us that's trying to get an initiative on the ballot, which would be like a proposition in California. And we have 86% of Montanans that want more wind and solar, and Montana has excellent wind and as much sunshine as Florida when you look at the whole scale of it. But trying to get past the policymakers here is a big lift, but we're working on it with an initiative. So the question, do you have any advice for people that are trying to go around policymakers and open up access to renewable energy? Because they have put all kinds of regulations against it.
Yeah, wow. You know, I applaud you, Dodie, and your group there. It must be so hard. And let's see, what advice do I have for you? First of all, don't give up and throw a bigger party. And, you know, also consider what's politically feasible. You know, how do we step by step, but very, very rapidly, make the change that we need? It could very well be that the initiative, that you're on the right track with that. I don't know. In California, initiatives are a very, very, very expensive proposition and require a lot of fundraising in order to do. That's why we've never really done them before. And maybe you just need to throw them out. I mean, maybe you need to elect new people, and maybe that's your energy. I honestly don't know, but I love that you're working on it.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Dodie. We're going to go next.
Oh, I have one other thing to say. Back, thinking of Dodie. Dodie, I hope you're still there. One of the things that, couple pieces of philosophy, I guess, from us that we've practiced here. We practice the no shame, no blame, we're all in this together. That means not humiliating our elected leaders, but just trying to keep the communication lines open, kind of keeping that respectful, nonviolent, if you will, approach to dealing with our elected leaders, even when we strongly disagree with them. We've had instances here where people have changed their whole point of view because we've never given up on them. Also, coupled with that philosophy about what we practice at the Center for Climate Protection is the view that there's an ecosystem of activism. And sometimes, you know, you hear about it in police circles about good cop, bad cop. Sometimes it's good that there's other people who are protesting and calling people out. So I think you have to be strategic about how you work with others, how you communicate with your local elected leaders, what role you're trying to play as you go forward.
Okay, well, next we're going to go to Rebecca Blanco. And you should be unmuted, Rebecca.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my question is, what if the change in price signals happens and climate-friendly choices are significantly more prevalent in the world? What would that look like?
Ooh, well, here's just a personal example. One time I went to our little grocery market and I bought some organic grapes. And when I was checking out, the checker goes, wait a second, these are cheaper than the conventional grapes. And I went, wouldn't it be cool if it was always like that? So that's, you know, that's what it would look like on an individual level. I think when you're checking out is that these green choices would always be cheaper. And pretty soon, then businesses, you know, producers and so on and so forth would have to compete more and more in the green space. Who can be the greenest? Who can offer the best product that is the most eco-friendly of any? That's, I think, what it would look like.
Okay. So Caroline, are we going back to the questions in the Q&A?
Yeah, let's do that, and let's see if more people join into the, want to join us live as well. Carolyn is asking a couple of questions. What policy solutions would devalue fuel assets now in the ground in order to keep it in the ground? And another question from her is, what policies accelerate carbon sequestration? Is it a change in agriculture models that we currently suffer? So those are the questions from her.
Okay, those are great questions. All right, so how to keep fossil fuel in the ground, which we absolutely have to do. I think that that's the value of a cap on carbon, and you know, we don't do a great job overall anywhere in the country of this, because I firmly believe, as said before, that it has to be coupled with dividends so that the people in the lower economic rungs are not penalized for rising fossil fuel prices. But if we had a strong price on carbon that increased year after year after year, it would be economically disadvantageous for companies to be hauling, you know, to be mining fuel out of the ground, whether it's, you know, under the oceans or in the Arctic or in California in the gas fields or whatever. We want those price signals to hit the corporations first. This is not a good choice for you, and we're seeing that actually with car companies, and we're seeing it not fast enough, and we're seeing it with companies. Shell and BP and others are scrambling to figure out what they're going to do in a post-carbon world. Hallelujah. Then the second question was about ag and sequestering carbon. I think similarly, and this is a little tricky because it's so indirect, is that there should be financial rewards for sequestering carbon. Look at how farmers are struggling. And what if they could make more money the more carbon that they sequestered in their soil, and the less that they were using, you know, greenhouse gas intensive fertilizers. So we need to get those price signals so that they go throughout our economy, and the very people that we want to protect, our farmers, especially those that are trying to do the right thing, that they can make good money doing that.
Great. I want to go back to, thanks, Anne. I want to go back to Joel. Let's see. Oops. Joel, I'm going to find that again. There's a lot of questions coming in, Anne.
Oh, I like that.
So first I'll go to Lynn. How politically feasible do you feel concepts of energy democracy across the U.S. outside of the West Coast states like California are?
I think it's how politically feasible. Well, it kind of depends on how you frame it, I think. I mean, with community choice, and that is spreading across the United States, I think it is feasible. And what's nice about community choice is that it's something that local governments are empowered to do, and that means local communities are empowered to make that happen. And it almost always starts with local activists working on community choice. It takes a while to lift it up, but it almost always is local activists who are convincing local elected leaders that this is a smart thing to do. And, you know, in California, the environmental justice movement has grown more and more and more powerful. So it shows what collective force can do as far as implementing policy. Here's an example from a number of years ago when California passed the Global Warming Solutions Act. An additional policy was put in place that 25% of the money that was generated through the cap and trade program would go to disadvantaged communities. So political force and, you know, don't give up. I think it's certainly possible.
Gloria's making the comment that we don't need a majority, as Erica Chenoweth suggests, and that Malcolm Gladwell is saying 14% of the people moving in the same direction is what we need to create the tipping point. So there's another, some more thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm.
And Joel is asking, does the Center for Climate Protection have a plan to expand to organize local satellite groups and to support those groups with guidance, strategies, tactics to implement local climate change organizations and actions?
Not exactly. I mean, we've thought about it, and you know, we don't even have our own personal roadmap or our organizational roadmap for how we make this happen. We have some immediate next steps, but we haven't implemented them yet. But I love that question, Joel. You're going to see my email later on, so maybe we can be in touch.
Carrie is asking, since there are a large percentage of climate funders on this call, how do those of us working on the ground connect with them, especially those of us who are small organizations? Are there opportunities for partnerships that Transition US or the Center for Climate Protection can help facilitate?
Yeah, Caroline, I think that's your question.
I don't have the answer to it yet, Carrie, but it's definitely, yeah, more bridges between groups on the ground and funders. And I think funders that recognize the importance of networks of people are unfortunately quite a rare breed. But I think those funders that really see sort of the systemic support that networks offer, and can help those networks identify leverage points and put that whole system into motion is one strategy that we'd love to talk with funders about. And I'm sure, you know, all of us doing our different pieces, yeah, if we can strategically map that out and set them off at the right time, will be a powerful force.
Yeah. Powerful party.
Yeah, powerful party. Shari is asking, what do you recommend as far as the scale of political activism? Local, region, or national? Local seems easier to see and achieve results, but is national the only scale that will make enough change?
Okay, I love this question. Thank you, Shari. Okay, so this goes to something I like to talk about called levers and levels. The levels being from local to international, just as your question suggests, and the levers mean the policy solutions that work at that particular level. So community choice is great because it can, once you have state enabling legislation, not all states do, but once you have that, then you can implement it locally. And but on transportation, I don't know if people noticed in that stacked bar chart I showed of Sonoma County's greenhouse gas emissions, the turquoise was our transportation emissions. And there are not good levers at the local level for dealing with transportation. And that is why at the Center for Climate Protection, we have expanded our scope to work at the state level, because we have to deal with transportation and there's no good levers to do that at the local level. I mean, we've got some, you know, Sonoma Clean Power, our community choice entity, incentivized purchasing EVs, but that can only go so far.
And we're probably not going to be able to get through all of the questions because we have about 5 minutes left. But I know that you have given us the means of contacting you, and maybe we could get that slide up too on the screen so people can get ready for that. And
Okay.
we'll do a few more questions, then we'll get some closing comments from Anne. One person is asking, what's something I can do today? I've read Marshall. As far as personal impact, studies have shown that there are holes: reproductive rights, plant-based diet, traveling less, etc. What would you suggest?
Well, I first love that you've read the book. And second, I love that you are working on your individual impact. And third, I would talk about a quote from Bill McKibben. Bill McKibben, an international climate leader. He said, "The question I get asked the most by activists is, what can I do?" And he said it's the wrong question, not to be negative here. He said the right question is, what can we do? And we can't deliver speed and scale solutions without working collectively. So that's my advice, is find some people and start working collectively and start building your political force.
Raz is asking, have you been following the science about CO2 storage problems? What's called the 1,000-year ouch? Most people assume the excess CO2 will dissipate as quickly as air pollution does. Unfortunately, it's on a time scale of many centuries, which means we need to drain the excess CO2 bathtub in addition to turning down the faucet through emissions reduction. Are you familiar with the field of carbon dioxide removal and climate restoration?
Yeah, absolutely. That is such a good metaphor, that bathtub that we have. Now the bathtub is overflowing with carbon. That's our atmospheric blanket of greenhouse gas emissions. So how do we suck carbon out of the atmosphere? Because he's right that it stays up there a long, 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 long time. That's the carbon ouch, I think, that you're talking about. So, you know, there's a lot of people casting about right now for how do we do that. The technology, what do they call it? The carbon capture and storage is expensive, and it's not that great right now. And, you know, even here in Sonoma County and in Northern California, we have projects called the Marin Carbon Project that are measuring carbon absorption in the soil, and how do we go about doing that. There's, you know, I've got a friend who has some technology that he's investing in on a technology that sucks the carbon out and puts it to good use. But absolutely, that is really, there's a huge gap in how are we going to get CO2 out of the atmosphere. So we have to do that, as well as we have to stop pumping it into the atmosphere.
A comment from Chris. I just want to alert everyone to something that I learned about today from George Monbiot's article in The Guardian, that ecocide was removed from the Rome Statute, meaning the International Court of Human Rights cannot try anyone for harming the planet. An organization based in the UK is fighting to get ecocide included on the statute, meaning that billionaire corporate bosses and the politicians who enabled them could be sued in the Court of Human Rights. Anyone can sign up to support them, and the website is missionlifeforce.org, so thank you for that.
Yeah, and I want to say that, you know, policies aren't just laws. They can be treaties, they can be legal decisions, they can be regulations. So this falls in that category of a policy that needs to be put in place so it affects the whole system. Thank you for bringing it up.
One other comment, and then I think we'll do closing round with you, Anne, is from Victor. I believe that it could be a good idea to try a collaborative platform to engage people all over the world to build the pathway together. And after that, have people working to make changes from global to local and other groups of people making the movement from local to global. And part of the effort could be almost like a game, like play the call was something that was suggested. So there's a lovely idea. So Victor, I hope you help us make that work. And there's a number, I'm so sorry not to be able to get to everyone else. And Anne wanted to give you some time to do some closing remarks of your own, what you want to emphasize for the people on the call, what's come up for you with the questions that you want to make sure you leave us with.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you again, Dawn and Caroline, for giving me this opportunity. It's really kind of a new experience for me, and I welcome people's feedback and ideas. We've been getting some of that. I just am grateful and honored by your questions and your participation in this webinar. It was fun. And if you want to be notified, Jock Buddy and I are we've been working on this paper for a year. But if you want to be notified when the paper becomes available, please email me and I'll put you on the list. And another way to stay in touch with our work here at the Center for Climate Protection, and by the way, we are, you know, we work statewide, but we're small. We have about 15 people who work here, and we're a mighty force, and we aspire to being mightier in collaboration with the rest of you out there in the climate movement. So if you want to stay in touch with us, sign up for our e-newsletter, and there's the website where you can sign up.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne, for delving in with all this great information today. And just wanted to thank all the participants and for hanging out with us and all of your great questions. And again, apologies that I couldn't get to everyone and get every comment and question before and today. But please do send her an email if you do have some other burning questions or some more of your great suggestions. That would be wonderful. We will be making a recording of this. It will be posted on our YouTube channel at transitionus.org. You can find it there, top bar, links to that channel. And I guess without further ado, I think Dawn is planning to unmute people so that we can give a shout out in person to Anne. And if you want to give a shout out of your appreciation and also where you're from.
It's a little bit more difficult to do on the webinars platform. I have to.
So we're not going to do that, Dawn, or
everybody individually, but maybe you could just type something into the chat.
There, type into the chat something, one of your takeaways from this. We'll make sure we share that with Anne. So without further ado, we'll be signing off here, and hopefully you'll join us for the next round or join the effective collaboration course that Dawn will be leading, and certainly pay attention to all the good work at the Center for Climate Protection. All right, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.